I'm going to start my discussion post. So, the things that I watched and read it was an article, the Two Stories article about the two different high schools, Fieldstone, I believe, and University Heights, and it talked about how they're both located in the same area, but one has a higher economic status with wealthier students, and the other high school, which is University Heights, is one of lower income status of families who don't have a lot of money and who have a very different experiences than these people who grew up in a private school and stuff like that. And so it talks about the difference between the two schools, and then it has testimonies from each, from like I think maybe 12 students, and there are 6 who went to Fieldstone and 6 who go to University Heights, and they're comparing their experiences with each other. And then the next thing that I watched was Anna Deavere Smith and her ancestry, and going over her past and her family from from the 1800s. And so we learned about Basil Biggs, who was a free black man who was a veterinarian and also moved to Gettysburg and then fled the Confederate invasion for the Battle of Gettysburg. And then he came back to his farm, and there was bodies everywhere. And so the president hired him to clean up the bodies, bury them, and he used that money to buy his own farm and build his veterinary schooling. And then he used that privilege to free slaves for the Underground Railroad. So that was really cool to learn about her story. Last thing that I watched was the performance of Anna Smith, who did an everyday life performance of many testimonies, which focused on police brutality, education, bringing awareness to the tragedies that are happening today when it comes to the black community and what they're going through. And so she uses people who have gone through police brutality, who have seen it, and then she also goes through professionals who have knowledge in particular fields like education, psychiatry, judges, lawyers, people like that who are in law. How I make sense of this performance is by acknowledging the fact that these testimonies are from people who have experienced police brutality, witnessed police brutality, people who are experienced a failed education system, people in the education system, professionals that deal with trauma, or teachers, people who are professionals, judges, who have gone through cases and studied their field of practice. And so just understanding that these are all stories that are factual and can be trusted. The stories that are arranged, I think how she started it was very specific. She started it very strong with a video of Freddie Gray being taken away by police in a very rough and unethical way. And then she goes on to be tells the story of somebody who was recording the incident and what was going through his brain and what he thought was right and wrong and things like that. And I thought it was very important and interesting that she started off so strong, because that really brought the reader or the viewer in and drew them in to pay attention of what they were looking at. And then she ends it in a very specific way as well. In the middle, it's revealing all of the horrible things and revealing stories that are sad and really hard to watch. And then at the end, she wraps it all up by giving an inkling of hope and saying that by the forgiveness of the guy who was beaten by an officer, and the officer coming in and apologizing, shows, and crying and being very emotional about apologizing for what he had done shows reconciliation, and the fact that the guy actually forgave him shows that our country can be reconciled. The themes that I see in this performance are education, police brutality, advocacy. I think she uses education throughout it, talking about people who have been in the education system and have been failed or flunked out or kicked out of the education system because of their actions. As an education system, the education system failed them because they were not looking at the cause of their actions, and they were only looking at the consequences of their actions. So that is something that is throughout it. And also, there's also police brutality. There are multiple videos in the performance that show point blank what happened, and they're very violent and vivid and very hard to watch. And thirdly, it's advocacy. The stories that she is saying are told in a way to push her agenda of advocating for the Black community. As for my experience, as a white person, I do not relate with anything that she talked about when it comes to the Black community, because I am not Black and I cannot experience those things. And also just shows us, because we live a life that is more privileged and more sheltered from the violence that the Black community faces, it educates us on a different demographic of people who need, not only need help, but just showing their struggles and being like, you're not the only person in the world, like, there are people who have it worse than you, type thing, if that makes sense. And also, I think something else that I thought about with myself was when she was going through her ancestry and seeing all of the wonderful things that Basil Biggsat did, I kind of got fearful, because I was like, I really want to know my history and I really want to know my ancestry, but I'm also kind of fearful that I'm going to find something that is terrible. Like, what if I have ancestors that were slave owners, or ancestors that were a part of the Confederate Army, or something like that? It brings in a little bit of fear for me to find out what my ancestors did in America in the 1800s or further back. I do think that this style of performance is effective, specifically with this performance. I think that she used the stories and the performance in a way to advocate for the Black community. And how she did that was by using testimonies that were credible, like professionals in the education field, lawyers, judges, psychiatrists, people like that who have knowledge on the field that they are working in, and that gives credibility. And also, eyewitnesses give credibility. People who have seen for themselves the violence that has been upon this community. I also think that this is an argument. I think that she is arguing for that community. I definitely think that that is what one of her goals are, is to advocate for them. It is valuable because you are able to, it's a different way to advocate for sure for other things if you use this type of performance to advocate for other things. I'm also still trying to figure out what the value is of this performance, not because I don't see any value. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what is the importance of it. How she shows empathy is very clear. I think that she, the way that she uses the music in the background, cello, was very emotional, because it softens your heart to be open to what you're about to listen to. It's a strategy that I think she used, to use that soft music to open the audience's heart to what is about to be seen. And also the videos of the police brutality and everything, that really is emotional and empathetic. But she also portrays the emotion of the speaker and adopts that emotion to portray it to the audience. And I think that is another way she shows empathy. Ethical questions that I think that should be asked is, do you truly understand what the story is, and do you understand the speaker? And are you doing the empathy process when you are doing the everyday life performance. And what are your intentions for performing? Are you there to spread hate or awareness? Are you dropping the emotions and all? Is this problematic? I think it can be if you are trying to exaggerate the story or make it a character or performing with wrong intentions or trying to make it better. And I also think that if you are doing it for advocacy reasons, like this performance, I don't think it's so much problematic as it is developing conflict, which I think can be good. Likes and dislikes. I loved the performance, and I think I would recommend it to anybody to watch it because it was very educational and empathetic and emotional, and I loved it. However, I did not like the content, but that's obvious. I don't think anybody likes the content of the video, not because of how she portrayed it or what her purpose was. The content is hard to watch, and it is challenging. And as a white person, it is challenging, but I think it's good, and I think it's important that we educate ourselves on things that we do not like to see, because how else are we going to be able to understand the world and the people in it? So for that reason, that is the only thing that I didn't like. But that's a good thing, I would say, is that nobody should like that. Nobody should like watching videos like that. The things that related or connected to our chapters are stories. Obviously. We talk about in the chapter different types of stories, myths, folktale, whatever. These are actual stories that are true, but stories are dynamic. They always change depending on who is telling them. For Anna, she wasn't just telling a story that someone told her. She was but saying verbatim what they said, and actions and words was matching exactly. And so I think that is important. It is dynamic, but she made it clear cut. This is the story that was told. It's communal, which means it is shared with communities, and it changes communities, and it changes people. And I think these stories change communities and change people. And that is exactly what she's trying to do with that. And then there are aesthetic artifacts, which they become concrete. They become masters. These stories become mastered and skillful stories to tell. And obviously the empathy process is involved in this performance. We have recognition, which is knowing the speaker and the point of view, and knowing the feelings and thoughts, and acknowledging the speaker and their credibility. So it's not just hearing it, but it's listening to it and acknowledging the story that is being told and the feelings that go with it. Then there's convergence, which listener and speaker come together. They identify the pain or the happiness or the emotion that the speaker is feeling. They identify it, and they see through the listener, or they see through the speaker's eyes. And then there's adoption, which is what Anna is. That's what she's showing the audience, is her adoption of the story. She has completely taken the story upon herself, told it exactly how the speaker told it, but adopting those emotions. And we see that as an example in the very end, when that guy is apologizing to the other guy, or the police officer is apologizing to the guy for beating him, and he starts to cry, or she starts to cry, because that's what he did. And so she's adopting that emotion into her performance. And so I think that's a very good example of adoption. Yes, that is it.